Welcome to another episode of On the Way Home. It is a chilly one here in Toronto and across the country. As always, we have a great guest on today. And sadly today, my co-host, Meg the Temp, or just Meg, you can call her. She is joining us in place of Stefania. But this will be Meg's last podcast as she is heading out for greener pastures. Meg, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Michael. Happy to step in. It's definitely bittersweet in that this will be the last podcast I am on, but I'm really excited about our guest today and really happy I got the chance to step in for one last recording of On the Way Home.
Hey, if nothing else, you'll always have these podcasts are forever. I'm sure you'll be, making your grandkids listen to them on whatever the latest technology is in the future and saying, I was once a podcast star called Meg the Temp. Meg, what is happening at Blue Door right now in your final week at Blue Door? What's going on? Anything special happening?
We have a ton of stuff going on at Blue Door as usual. We are really preparing for our coldest night of the year event, which is at the end of February, where we walk. We're actually doing it virtual this year, just in light of COVID-19 and keeping everybody safe. But our team is prepping for volunteers, for promotion, for that whole walking event. There's obviously still a great need for support in the housing and homelessness sector, particularly at Blue Door, and our programs, Mosaic Interfaith Out of the Cold program as well, providing emergency shelter. So that event is going to raise a lot of funds and be really great for us. So we are organizing all those teams to get out and go. That's on February 26th, and people can find more information on that specific event at cnoy.org/Richmond Hill for our event, but the events are actually across Canada. So organizations across Canada are walking. So it's a great Canada-wide event for people to support those experiencing homelessness.
Hey, listen, and speaking of Canada-wide and national, let me tell you a little bit about our guest we have today. We have Scott MacAfee. He is the chair of the National Advisory Council on Poverty. Scott is a student of life, seeking out the new, innovative, and interesting, and connecting them to each other and existing systems. He lives and works from a strength-based approach where all people have something to contribute. He spent the last 19 years with the government of New Brunswick, working on poverty reduction through the Department of Social Development, Economic and Social Inclusion Corporation. Scott supported the creation and evolution of the community inclusion networks and has helped with the development of over 500 community projects. He's chaired the Omista Credit Union, Fallsbrook Center, New Brunswick Food Security Action Network, and the Fredericton Loyalist Rugby Club. He looks like a rugby player. He has also sat on the boards of the Atlantic Summer Institute, the Healthy Eating Physical Activity Coalition, and Team Rural NB. Scott is passionate about asset-based community development, storytelling, literacy, community transportation, and social enterprise. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Awesome, Scott. Well, I'm going to start off first with a question we ask all of our guests on the On the Way Home podcast. Our first question is, what does home mean to you?
Yeah, amazing question. So I think when I think of home, I think of kind of two things. One, I think it's an idea and a place. I think the idea of home is somewhere where you belong. I think both ways, like two-way belonging. So you belong to it, it belongs to you. And the other piece is it's somewhere that's safe, secure, where you're cared for, you feel love. I think that's kind of when I think of home. Sometimes it's a place, sometimes it's people, but it's always full of caring and love.
Awesome, that's a great answer. I love the duality of that, and always fun to hear everybody's interpretation of what home means to them. So let's talk about the National Advisory Council on Poverty. Who are they, and what is their mandate?
Yeah, so in 2019, there was a call for applications. They received about 800 applications from across the country after what seemingly was a super long process. In August, 10 folks from across the country got a call from Minister Duclos at the time. So we're a diverse group from coast to coast to coast, from Vancouver to Yellowknife to Fredericton, New Brunswick. and all points in between. We have 10 members, very, very diverse, and really kind of a lot of people that are doing great work on their own, and then collectively we have a kind of a shared respect, and it's really a working council. We do a lot of interesting stuff. We have 3 mandates: provide independent advice to the Minister of Families, so Karina Gould, the Honourable Karina Gould. The second one is to produce a report on the progress of towards poverty goals annually. So the poverty goals are 20% reduction in poverty by the year 2020, which we hit. Mind you, that was based on 2018 numbers, so we'll see what the pandemic has in store for us. And then the second goal is to a 50% reduction in poverty in Canada by the year 2030. That lines up with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the third mandate, I guess there's a fourth mandate too, but the third mandate is to have an ongoing conversation with Canadians about poverty, and that's why it's so great to be on your show today. The fourth mandate is other duties as assigned. So I think that everyone has that in very small print at the end of their employment contracts, but that's definitely in ours as well. So we can be directed by the minister to kind of look at anything that she has a particular interest in.
Well, I think that makes total sense. When you have a group this talented together, right, and as new challenges come up, they're going to definitely throw them your way. One of your goals, I think, is to produce an annual report.
Right.
For this council, right? So can you talk about the process about putting this all together?
Yeah, so interesting times to produce an annual report. So when we started out, we had a really big 8-week plan to go coast to coast to coast. We started in March 2020, and we landed in Vancouver, and we spent 2 days in Vancouver. At the time, there were 10 COVID cases in Vancouver, in West Van. That was it in Vancouver, and then we went to Yellowknife and Edmonton, Saskatoon, Prince Albert, and Winnipeg. We landed in Winnipeg on the 12th of March 2020. The world shut down on the 12th of March 2020. That was when it was declared a global pandemic. The airports were empty. It was the weirdest thing, leaving Winnipeg, flying back to East Coast. Got home on the 14th, and I've been here for 2 years since. We had met with about 200 people living in poverty in those first 2 weeks. I had circle conversations, gathered people together, went to where they were, met around food. We had some questions. Our question we started with was, what does poverty mean to you? Which was a question that we worked through with a human-centered design specialist, because it was a question you could lean in and lean out from. So if they wanted to talk about their personal experience, they could, but they could also talk about what the idea of poverty meant to them. I think that's why I like your home question, because you could lean in and lean out from that one as well. So the 200 people, we produced our first report based on that. We came home, did a lot of thinking, dug into the stats, and we produced a report with 5 recommendations initially. So in 2020, the 2020 report has 5 recommendations. It was released in 2021. In 2021, obviously, we don't want to be, this council didn't want to be the cause of bringing COVID to any impoverished communities or anybody at all. So we decided to go virtual. We started with a plan to have about 8 virtual national conversations that were theme-based. So we had conversations based on like food security and literacy and place-based poverty reduction, so incorporating that kind of local aspect into it, institutional care, and racialized populations, some of the big kind of, and housing homelessness, obviously. And from that, we heard lots of interesting stuff. So we the first kind of 6 or 8, we evolved our thinking. So we're like, well, we're hearing a lot about this. Let's have another conversation about this. So we expanded. We went into like gender. So gender was a big one. The 2S LGBTQ. That was another one where we started to hear a lot of things around homelessness and poverty and different supports that were required. We went to social innovation as well, because we heard a lot of people doing a lot of pretty cool things. So it was an interesting process. So and we kept expanding. And then when we didn't hear enough from a certain place, we're like, well, let's just go talk to them. So we talked to the Yukon, we talked to Quebec a couple of times, Newfoundland. And East Coast representation was a little bit slow initially. We talked to Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, PEI, some of the places that didn't have as much representation in our national conversations, just to make sure we had a truly national outlook on poverty.
Amazing.
We took that, so we took that, all that information, and which you can imagine, it ended up being 22 sessions. And we built on as we went. So we produced kind of pages of documentation as we went. So it was kind of what we heard, sheets from each individual conversation. We looked for common themes. We pulled them out and then said, well, okay, now what's the policy gap? What's the lever we have here? Because a lot of poverty is, we try to figure out how we can actually change it. A lot of poverty is ingrained, it's systemic, it's hard to get to, and so that was where we got with the report. It took us about 5 months to put it together, and then it was going to be hopefully released on the October 17th, which is the International Day of Eradication of Poverty, and then they called the federal election, so then everything got kind of paused, and then so our report got released mid-December. On a day that was really didn't have any significance at all, but it was a good day for us because it meant the report was out and we could start working on the next one.
Right, amazing. Thank you, Scott, for sharing those details. And can you maybe share with us some of the highlights or learnings in particular from the year's report?
Yeah, it's a really poverty is an interesting piece, and I think when we get to that question of what does poverty mean to you, we really got into it a bit, that it was poverty's individual experience, and no two people experience poverty in the same way. But we also learned that, and we heard often that poverty was an individual experience of a systemic inequity. So it's not something they're doing particularly themselves to be in poverty. There's a system at play that's putting them at greater risk of being in poverty. We heard a lot about intersections. The biggest intersection of all being gender. So if you're a female in Canada, the odds of you living in poverty are heightened. And as soon as you start adding any risk factors or any differences at all into that mix, then your risk of poverty gets exponential. So if you're racialized, if you gender identity, sexual identity, location, like if you're rural, so there's a lot of things that add up, and it's pretty oppressive. Disabilities, indigenous, like these factors really play heavily on the kind of your chance of living in poverty or not living in poverty. So that was interesting. Someone said that someone who benefits from poverty, and that was an interesting question. That someone does benefit from poverty, and that many people that actually benefit from poverty would be unknowing of that fact. The people who are able to get low priced items are probably supporting poverty because they're not paying enough for their items, and so people aren't being paid enough for their work. So there's some interesting angles on it. We heard a lot about housing and food prices. Housing affordability was a big factor. Just because that people often sacrificed food for housing, and in some places they couldn't even afford housing after they sacrificed all their food. But yeah, so it was an interesting process, and it was really cumulative. We talked about a lot of health. Health seemed to weave its way through a lot of things, and that was interesting to see how that actually played a part, and how that health equity could be a foundational piece to a more prosperous society, but a more kind of equity-based society as well.
Well, Scott, I wouldn't say I'm shocked at some of those things. We know health, housing, poverty are all connected, and unfortunately are becoming more and more challenging. I encourage people to take a look at this report, read through it. Scott's hitting on some of the highlights. And speaking of highlights, you mentioned earlier there were some recommendations coming out of this. These are the actions we need to take to make impact. Can you talk to us a little bit about those recommendations?
Yeah, so we broke our recommendations down into 5 distinct areas. It was the big thing, and in 2021 or 2020, we had one of our recommendations was kind of Indigenous poverty, and to move forward on some self-determination stuff. But obviously, with the year that 2021 was in Indigenous Canada, with the kind of unearthing of all the remains of all the children, and that systemic, genocide of a generation, and attempted genocide, a generation or multiple generations of Indigenous Canadians. We felt that it deserved a lot more recognition. So our first one was Indigenous prosperity through truth, reconciliation, and renewed relationships. But so much work has already been done in this. So we thought that the best way we could support it was to kind of renew the calls to implement the actions of the Truth and Reconciliation Report and the actions of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Report, or those calls to action. So that was recommendation 1. So we thought that was really important to put that first and foremost. The second recommendation was around equity. So a lot of the stats that we have in Canada, so if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, that kind of idea is kind of compelling for some. Not personally. I think that things that move me in the heart move me first, and things that move me in the head move me last. But I think the combination of both are important. So a lot of groups that live in poverty in Canada, we have no count of. We have no way to track who's living in poverty. We don't track success. And a lot of them were based in the fact that of sexism, colonialism, racism. So we figured that there needed to be better data, better survey questions. Better questions lead to better answers, and better answers lead to better data, and better data hopefully leads to better decisions. The second piece was we have a goal for poverty, and that's a goal for poverty generally, but we don't have we didn't have goals established for any of the kind of the main marginal groups. So any racialized Canadians or person with disabilities or 2S LGBTQ, we didn't have any kind of metrics on that. So we didn't have any goals set, and if you don't have a goal, you may not reach it, or you will reach it because you don't have one. So we put that in, that we should have a goal that lines up with the national goal, so that 50% reduction in poverty by 2030. Then we want to do like dignity. So there's a lot of programs that you have to beg and grovel for, and be a model minority, or whatever the program is. You have to jump through a lot of hoops often to get the support that's set up through that program to get it to you. So we talked about things, low barrier access, better coverage, maybe less oversight in some cases, or less kind of proving that you're worthy. The worthy poor is a really weird concept that we seem to perpetuate sometimes, and that you're worthy of help, and that so we thought that we could put some things in place, really do a service design, make it about the person, not about the system. So some of that, and we talked about automatic enrollment as well. So there's a lot of benefits that exist within tax systems that are triggered by, or within the federal system that are triggered by taxes, and the provincial system that are triggered by other things. But if they're eligible for them, then we should provide them automatically and not make people, one, know about the program, so someone has to tell them, and two, apply, which may be a challenge for some, and then have a way to get it. So if they're eligible for it, give it to them. That seems reasonable. It's almost like on Amazon when they said people who bought this might also like this. If they just put that stuff, if you're eligible for it and it was going to be free, just give it to them. Then we looked at things that were upstream. So looking upstream, poverty prevention. Canada's already announced a lot of things: Canada Workers Benefit, Canada Disability Benefit, Canada Housing Benefit. Get on with it. Get those things. Let's bring those things to reality. And so that was one of the calls to action. And then to increase investments in some areas where where we're not doing as well as we could. Food security, housing, obviously earlier in childcare, but that's been a big step forward, and we'll wait to see what that looks like, what it actually turns into, what it feels like, I guess, when it hits the air. I know Nova Scotia is moving forward on June 1st. And retroactive to January 1st. So we'll see. I think that may be one of the first test cases. We've seen what happened in Quebec, 15 years ago, and we'll see if that holds true. So that would be interesting. And the last one was around employment income and income support. So one was a coordination of all benefits, provincial and federal. So figure that out, so that the person that's living in poverty doesn't have to figure it out for you if you're eligible for benefit. And we provide so much benefits and supports. Can we make them up so we're not providing support to people and then they're still living in poverty? So let's bring that up to the market basket measure, to the Canada's official poverty line. So we had, that was one of our ones from 2021 as well, or 2020. So we reiterated. We talked about living wage, $15 an hour. Like, we want to bring up the minimum living wage. We're talking about minimum wage, and then increase access to employment benefits. So for EI and so a lot of people working part time and multiple jobs in the gig economy, or let's support them as well. And that's the shortest version of that I can say, but it's comprehensive. Sorry.
Oh, no, I mean, hey, listen, if you want to see all the work, we'll tell you where to go to check that out. But these are some solid recommendations. Let me ask you, Scott, what do you hope the impact of this work will be from those recommendations?
Yeah, I think if we could just kind of coordinate and align the benefits that already exist, we'd be getting there. I think the goal of 50% of a 50% reduction of people in Canada, I think we started at 4.2 million or 4.8 million after the rebasing. We're down to 3.2 million. That's still 3.2 million too many people living in poverty. But if we reduce it by half, I think it's a good start. I think that would enable us to maintain the same budget, but then focus it on the people that are remaining, and then increase additional benefits. Really try to increase your efforts. I think that the report provides government some actions, but I think it also provides a kind of a common agenda for everyone to work towards. So if you read this, that the government could have low barrier access to programs and services, maybe your organization could as well. I think that there's some kind of overarching thinking in it, which hopefully doesn't go lost. But it's really a call to action. I think that poverty is ours. It doesn't belong to the people who live in poverty. Poverty belongs to our society. And as long as there's any poverty, as long as any of us live in poverty, we all live in poverty. Live with poverty. And I think that if, as Canada, the idea of Canada, I suppose, is I don't think it has poverty in it. I'm not really willing to accept that we're all just okay with 1 in 10 of our friends, neighbors, and family live in poverty. And so this is kind of our effort to do something about that.
Awesome. And so we've talked about this report and how insightful it is and how useful it'll be. And you spoke to this a little bit, but can you speak to where poverty in Canada is headed kind of after this report and with this report in mind?
Yeah, so I think, poverty, so at the end of February, the Canada Income Survey comes out, and that's the kind of the annual check-in. So we'll see where poverty is headed. I know poverty's has improved for all groups. It hasn't improved at the same rate for all groups. I haven't seen the numbers, but I think, and that's maybe not worth anything, but I think poverty will go down again this year. The influx of money into the economy from the federal government in response to the pandemic has been huge. And this next year will measure, so 2022 CIS measures 2020 income. So I think 2020 income, first year of the pandemic, CERB was in full effect, $2,000 a month. That's a lot more than a lot of people ever earned on social assistance. A lot of people left social assistance to go into CERB. A lot of people took CERB and then forego their social assistance, or got it clawed back, or it depends on the province. So I think poverty is trending down. I think that the people that are still living in poverty are probably living in a greater depth of poverty now. I think that poverty, the number might shrink, but the people that, I think that we're getting the people on the edge of that poverty line, and we're helping them just above it. But I'm not sure that's equity. I'm not sure that's dignity. I think that we need to get everybody from under it and put them above it, and then start figuring out how we can find ways for them to contribute, for them to fully participate in society. And to do that this year, instead of our engagement with national conversations that were theme-based, we're doing kind of cross-pollination. We're looking at big kind of overarching themes of the future, like future-proofing our social safety net. That'll be one of our conversations this year. So that will have food and housing and mental health, and like I think, and when we start having these conversations that bring in multiple perspectives from different corners of our country, then we'll start to get to some place where we can say, okay, well, this could really make a difference, and this would change the system, not only a program or a support. So I think we have to get to change in systems if we're going to get to that 50% reduction in poverty. But that's, hopefully that's where we get. But we still have, 8 years to get there. And I think there's a lot of work to put in before that happens.
Yeah. Yes, definitely agreed. And so where can people go to read and share the report and learn more about your work?
Yeah, so we have the report is on Canada.com or Canada.ca. I'll look up the actual. But yeah, so it's on the web. It's on you can look up National Advisory Council on Poverty, and it's in publications. But can you guys share the link as well?
Yeah, we can share that in the description of our of this
Awesome.
podcast for sure.
And then on some socials. So I think it's on the Minister Gould has it on her Twitter. I know that some of the members have put it up on their socials as well. So
great.
It's
now I heard a rumor too that in order to be on the council, all of you were going to get the recommendations tattooed on your backs. Is that true too?
It's a rumor, but I've also heard that it's inaccurate.
Confirm nor deny? No.
Confirm nor
You
deny.
should. That should be. I mean, that to me is total buy-in.
Well, I think
right.
that,
If we're gonna, it's 100%.
I think that the recommendations would get a lot shorter and simpler if that was the case. So no, I think that the ultimate is let's all end poverty, and I think I could get behind putting that on my back.
All right. You heard it here. Scott has made a declaration. But listen, go check out this report. National Advisory Council on Poverty. They put a lot of hard work into this. Some awesome recommendations, some impactful and insightful findings. Check it out. We hope to have you back every year to talk more about it and see the learnings, to see the great progress that we're making. Let's be positive. So Scott, thanks so much to you and the council for all you do, and thanks for your time today, and thanks for sharing this work.
Yeah, Michael, one more thing.
Sure.
If you're interested in being part of these conversations that are coming up, reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn, or I'll give you my email, and you can put it in the description as well. Because I think part of it is that we don't need to talk to the same people that are doing the work all the time. I think we need to have unusual suspects, and I think unusual suspects can build empathy in areas we don't have currently access to. Poverty is a 1 in 10 problem in Canada, so 1 in 10 people live in poverty. The other 9 probably don't think about it very often, but that's all the other person, the 10th person, that's all they can think of. So I don't think that mental load is a weight that we should allow that 1 in 10 person to bear on their own. So if we can have the 9 people start to become involved and understand and empathize around the problem, I think we can make some strides. So if they're interested, if anybody that you're listening is interested in having a conversation or being part of a conversation, they're 90 minutes long, and it's time well spent. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. You heard it here. Hey, if you want to get involved, Be part of the solution. Talk with Scott. We will get you his information. Reach out to us on onthewayhome.ca, and we'll have that information for you. Scott, thanks so much for your work. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, Meg the Temp, your last podcast, it was an awesome one. I mean, to have the chair of the National Advisory Council on Poverty on, Scott, to talk about this amazing work, it's a good way to go.
Oh, definitely. This is a great conversation. I think Scott did an excellent job of having some really valuable sound bites for us. I was writing it down in my notes, just some of the key and insightful notes they found from this report. I think it'll be so valuable for people to read. I think in terms of us, in terms of Blue Door and the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, this is what we're living right now. So a lot of the findings, we're like, yes, we know this, we can see this in the work that we do. So in that way, it's really great to see that this National Council also is recognizing that and then making these really key recommendations. So I think it's really great to hear that and know that we have kind of that national team taking the steps to make that better and work on those items.
Yeah, I mean, they're making a difference. They're having impact. Poverty is on the decline. Still, as Scott said, one is one too many. But listen, a report is just a report until it actually, comes into action. It just gathers dust on a shelf. Old way of looking at books and stuff, or online. Be part of the solution. Check this out. Share it widely. Let's push hard. In a country like Canada, where poverty is absolutely preventable, let's make sure we're doing just that. And 2030 would be great. And this coincides actually with the National Housing Strategy, where chronic homelessness and homelessness will be ended. That's the goal by 2030, as well as poverty. So we've got 8 years to do some pretty big and miraculous things, but we can make it happen.
Yes, definitely agree.
Well, Meg, listen, we're wishing you here on the way home at Blue Door at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, we are wishing you all the best as you leave us to join the Piccadilly Circus. Meg is going on to a hospital foundation, which is super cool. She's going to continue to do great work there. We wish you all the best. Thank you for all the work being there from the beginning when this was out of the blue onto On the Way Home. You do great work, and you know what? There won't be another Meg the Temp.
Well, thank you, Michael. Working with you and our wonderful producers as well from the Pod Plant and Stefania from the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. It's been such a treat and a pleasure to see this podcast grow into On the Way Home. I'm so proud of what we've done, and there is so much room to grow still. So I'm excited to be an active listener and listen to you guys and the awesome guests we'll have in the future. So thank you for this last ride as host. It's been awesome, and thank you, listeners.
Very cool, Meg. We wish you all the best. You have not heard the last from Meg the Temp. Keep your eyes and ears open. She is going to make some real change happen across this country. And to the rest of you, we will see you next time on the way home.